I used to come here for the great Q&A afterwards, which I will, but Steve's introduction is always unique and different. So look, I'm the living epitome of today's system. I'm white, male, nearly 50, grey-haired, worked for an established business, been around for 132 years, and I'm up here to tell you that the current system doesn't work. It doesn't work environmentally, it doesn't work socially, it doesn't work economically. And some of the turbulence we've seen the last couple of weeks just goes to show that we need to change how we do business. So I'm going to share those thoughts and observations with you. My job is to provoke. I want you to have a good discussion with me afterwards in terms of Q&A, but above all, walk out of here to develop the solutions we need for a radically different approach to business. So look, let me just do a few brief words of framing at the beginning. You know, Marks & Spencer has been doing its Plan A because there is no Plan B for the one planet. We have its sustainability program for 10 years now, or nearly 10 years. We had our annual stakeholder event last night. Our new chief exec, Steve Ross, stood up and said it's right at the heart of his Marks & Spencer, despite all the headwinds and the challenges that we got as an organization. To be a purpose-driven business, a sustainable business is at the very heart of what he wants from us. And Marks & Spencer 10 years ago took a step back. It won lots of awards for something called corporate social responsibility, managing risks, stopping bad things from happening in factories and farms, keeping ahead of Greenpeace and The Guardian. But that's all it was. It was risk management. And the leader at the time, Sir Stuart Rose, turned around and said, Marks & Spencer is about leadership. It is not just about managing risk and compliance. So work out what it means to redefine retail. Now, 10 years on that journey, we've done at most 20 to 25% of what we need to do to radically change how people consume things. And actually, that's been through making our existing business model less bad. Less energy, less waste, less water, better fish, better cotton, better factories, better farms, better fridges, done on a grand scale. There's a simple reason why Marks & Spencer has won 230 awards for Plan A in the last 10 years. It's because it works. And lots of people look to us for leadership and understanding of how to do these things. Across thousands of stores around the world, thousands of factories, tens of thousands of farms, raw material sources, 2 million people in our supply chain, 32 million people shopping with us every year, buying 3 billion individual items. And Steve spoke about the challenge of stuff. We only sell 3 billion items, piece of food, clothing. Walmart, 25 times bigger than M&S, is probably selling 100 billion. There's at least 100 billion items of clothing sold on the planet every year, trillions of items of food. And as we start to look to the future that says we're shifting from a world of 7 billion to 9 billion, how are we going to feed everybody, clothe everybody, fly everybody, give them the phone, the car that they want? And crucially, we're moving from a world of 1 billion middle-class consumers, us, with access within reason to anything we want, to a world of 4 billion. As rightly, Mexico, South Africa, India, China starts to access the consumption patterns that we take for granted. But there literally aren't enough fish in the sea to provide for everybody's needs. So in the next 15 years, we've got to find a way of extracting 50% more energy, 50% more food, and 30% more water from a planet that is already creaking at the seams. So let me just offer 3 observations, environmentally, socially, and economically, about why we need to shift. And let me just use a couple of examples. That's all I'm going to use, just to sort of tee our thinking up for the day. Let me start with Brazil. Brazil has been a relative success story over the last 10 years. The crippling deforestation that we saw in the Amazon at the turn of the century, 25,000 square kilometers of forest disappearing every year, a staggering number. It's dropped to 5,000 kilometers. Now, that's still 5,000 square kilometers is still wrong, but much better. And yet that wobbles. We risk going backwards on that significant gain we've got because of political instability in Brazil, economic challenges there. So even some of the initial challenges, some of the making the existing business models less bad, is still at risk. Let me look at biodiversity. 390,000 species on the planet, plant species on the planet, 20% close to extinction. Driven by climatic change, but driven by the way that we consume and we extract from nature. The forests, the land use conversion, the impact on the oceans that we have. And those oceans, we face a world that by 2050, well in the lifetime of most people in this room, will have 1 billion tons of plastic in it. Now, plastic's light. 1 billion tons of plastic is an awful lot of plastic. That plastic soup is going to start getting back in the food chain and wandering back towards us. Careful what we create. Climate, again, you're a bright audience. You know that the first 7 months of this year, globally, first 6 months of this year, have been the hottest on record globally. It doesn't feel like that in the UK, but around the world, India's seen a record temperature, 123.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Literally too hot to work. And just put that in some economic numbers. I mean, the World Bank's estimated that means $2 trillion lost of economic output globally because it's too hot for people to work, not just in India, but elsewhere. Swap across to the other side of the world, the US. Lake Mead, the biggest reservoir of the States, 112 miles long, has dropped to its lowest level ever since it was opened in 1937. 40 million people depend upon that water for their very existence. So water stresses all around the world, but think about it, everything's connected. India wants to install 400 gigawatts of coal-fired electricity generation. It feels it has to develop, understandably. But where's the water going to come from when 330 million people in India at the moment don't have enough water to live properly on? India's about to spend $250 billion diverting water from the relatively wet north to the south and the east, with massive social and environmental implications of just doing that as well. And that energy mix it puts in, the coal that it puts in, it needs 60 trillion litres of water to cool the coal plants. Again, everything's linked. A third of all American economic output is dependent upon electricity generated in coal-fired power stations in water-deprived areas of the States. Again, a significant proportion of the US economic system at risk. We saw the wildfires, Fort McMurray burning in Canada. 80,000 people evacuated. It's like a scene from 1940 in Dunkirk, people literally running for their lives in a modern, civilized nation, running for their lives. So look, a huge number of figures. So, we could spend another 10, 15 minutes trailing these out. But these are the warning signs that our biggest factory, and sadly our biggest waste disposal unit, nature, is being put under intolerable pressure. We have to find a different way. But it's not all doom and gloom. Sometime in May the 10th, for the first time, for 4 hours, the UK survived without coal-fired electricity for the first time in 132 years. About the same time that Marks and Spencer has been in existence, for the first time we went without coal-fired electricity. And that's happened repeatedly through May as well. Portugal ran for 107 hours on 100% renewables. Germany did a day of nearly 100%. Denmark's getting 40% of electricity every year from wind. There are solutions out there. We need to take them to scale with more authority. And my final point environmentally, and it's from the great words of Christiana Figueres, who led the successful COP21 discussions in Paris a few months ago. Great success, amazing lady, amazing lady. Let's hope that she comes head of the UN potentially in the future. And Christiana turned around and said, despite COP21 being a great success, she's worried. Because the 10 years we've spent prevaricating getting there were our safety net. The 10 years that we potentially had to safely hit a 2-degree limit. Even with COP21 signed off, the chance of keeping the world below 2 degrees of warming is going to be tough. So that's some of the environmental challenges. And then social. And again, let me start very obviously with what's happened in the UK in the last couple of weeks. And Steve asked who in this audience from overseas, a good third of you. You're welcome. I'm so delighted that you're here with this nation, helping it go forward. Because none of the solutions that we need and the rest of the world need will ever be developed in isolation. One business on its own, one government on its own, one nation on its own. We need those linkages. And again, that centre drives that, which is to everybody's credit. But Brexit, and what we're seeing with the rise of Trump, the rise of Le Pen in France, does have its nasty undertones that will unsettle many people with liberal persuasion in this room. But remember, it's a cry for help from a significant proportion of society who does not feel that the system, big business, the media, politicians, finance, works for them. There's many complex reasons for why the vote happened last week. I'm not going to go into all of them. But I take it as a warning sign to anybody invested into the current economic system, that's us, that it's not working for a significant number of people. That was a protest vote. In other parts of the world, protests will be more violent, but we have to change what we do. Migration is being driven by climate change. Again, there's a significant footprint or handprint in Syria that said climate change and drought there in 2010-11 drove people off the land into the cities imploded, civil war started, and all the instability we've seen from there, driving migration in Turkey into Western Europe that's unsettled us. Jobs. Again, a significant number of blue-collar jobs have been lost from the relatively developed world to the developing world as China's become the engine house of manufacturing. Those that have lost their jobs, we sit here blithely and assume in sort of safe terms in Cambridge, just get another job. Well, for many people, they can't easily get another job. And we have to think about what that means particularly as I'll mention in a moment, as robotics comes through, as artificial intelligence comes through and threaten not just blue-collar jobs, but white-collar jobs, you've got to think what it means for people and how we transition. Human rights, again, I work in the clothing sector. A factory called Rana Plaza fell down in 2013, killed 1,100 people. Now, I've used a lot of big numbers. We've just thrown numbers around and bounced in this room, but let me just pause. 1,100 mothers, daughters, sons, fathers lost their lives for the sake of making a $1 t-shirt. Simply isn't right. We need a different approach to capitalism. Again, we've had the issue of tax, not just in the UK, but elsewhere in the world. How come it's big corporations, rich people pay so little, when I, an ordinary person, pay so much? I think it was Leon Hensley, the American billionaire, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, made the throwaway remark, taxes are for the little people. And that's how people feel today. Taxes are for the little people, not for big corporations and the rich. And of course, we live in a world where, hopefully, we will all live longer, but not necessarily happier lives. As we live longer and the healthcare systems of the world struggle to keep up with our aging population, new medical challenges await. We have to find a way to respond. And again, there'll be amazing business opportunities, maybe some constructed in this room, to respond to that challenge, but those challenges exist. So, lots of challenges socially as well to the established system. Now, there's reasons for optimism there as well. The 17 global goals that the UN created in September, for the first time gave us a sense of how to run a joined-up economy. Good economically, good socially, good environmentally. But we've got to turn that potential of those words on paper at a macro level into the reality of how people live their lives as well. And let me just finish with an economic framing of what we need to think about as well. I mentioned those climate risks, how very rapidly climate change is beginning to change the way we live our lives, the way that we run the business. A great survey done a few weeks ago said about 20% of investors around the world are climate literate. They're bright. They know what's happening. They know how to respond to it. About 30% have got a touching sort of knowledge of what's going on. And fully 50% are totally ignorant of what climate change might mean for their portfolios and their investments. And that's where your pensions, that's where your investments lie. And yet 50% have no idea what might happen. You've got the huge economic power of business emerging. You know, Apple's quoted at $500 billion on the stock market, cash amount of $200 billion. Saudi Aramco, the state oil company in Saudi Arabia, might be floated on the stock market. It will be valued at $2 trillion, bigger than the UK economy. So economic power is flowing to big corporations, but with economic power flows responsibility as well. Technology. Again, I alluded to the rise of robotics and artificial intelligence. Again, some amazing technologies will be used in this room to deal with many of the issues I've just shared with you. Electric vehicles, drones, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, biotechnology, Internet of Things, blockchain, you name it. It's a radical shift in how the economy works, hugely disruptive. But all those technologies have the power potential to be good, but also have the potential to be bad. And those businesses that are trusted to use them for the benefit of all, not just a small number of very rich billionaires who got to them first, will be the ones that prosper in the future. But again, it's not all doom and gloom. You know, the green economy is rising rapidly. In the UK, now worth £120 billion, employing over 400,000 people. So green growth is possible. Again, we need to take it from being a small part of the economy to a scale part of the economy as well. So look, as a businessman, I stand here very clear. We live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We've got to find a way to navigate through it. There's a responsibility to change the economic system that we depend upon today, as Marks and Spencer, as any business that participates in the economy. But I want to be very clear with you as an audience of innovators. There are amazing opportunities to create new business models, new technologies that benefit all, and a lot of the answer lies in this room. And we started to see that. You know, I will only use a few examples. The examples of Zipcar, taking cars off the road because people in cities just don't need to own a car that's on the drive for 23 hours a day or literally, well, not used 6 days a week. You can rent your car when you need it. Tesla, I love the story of Elon Musk. Here is a brave entrepreneur that's looked into the future and said, all the car companies are sat there calmed. Electric vehicles don't work, they're ugly, they run out of power after 20 miles, no one's going to buy them. Elon Musk took $14 billion of advanced sales of his unbuilt Model 3 in a few weeks earlier this year. $14 billion, faster than any technologies ever sold. and one doesn't exist yet, or apart from a concept car. Because people want to be associated with something that's aspirational, looks fantastic, great performance, and will drive for at least 200 miles. That is radical innovation. That's what lies in here. Who in here is the next Elon Musk? eBay's a funny one. eBay came around, in some ways, is the forefront of the circular economy. There were people wondering what to do with all those things that litter the home, that never used, that think about throwing away, just rotted in a corner of the house. And even though eBay probably never set itself up as an explicitly environmental model, in practice, it created one. A circular economy where people started to extract value from wasted assets, whether it's space in the house, Airbnb, car that became rented, Uber, and eBay were at the forefront of that. So these new models to utilize waste assets will only grow in the future. Kickstarter, Bitcoin, I think it's fascinating. I've mentioned that the mobility industry has been very complacent about Tesla. The financial sector is just as complacent. It sits there, how can you replace a bank that's been around for 300 years? Never happen, never happen. Yet Kickstarter, yet Bitcoin, fintech, all these things are starting to shake the established tree of how we thought about money and finance, and democratize it and subvert the traditional system. And again, change will happen. And if we can develop these new business models that respond to the challenges I've outlined, there are 5 big benefits for any organization. Trust, emotional engagement with your customer. And I'm going to come back to the word customer because I want to challenge us repeatedly about the word customer. But to have 32 million people trust Marks & Spencer in a marketplace that does not trust the system is critically important. To have 32 million people that trust Marks & Spencer to use new technologies that bring them new great benefit, but they only trust Marks & Spencer to use them, is of great interest to us. So suddenly trust becomes an incredibly important asset to have as a business. The second thing is engagement. A purpose-driven business, one that its employees work for pay and rations, of course, career advancement, but also offers them a reason to work, a world that they can change through the very essence of working for Marks & Spencer, is a more productive business, it's a more motivated business, it attracts more talent. Thirdly is lean. Everybody needs to cut its cost base. The marketplace we operate in now is so brutally and remorselessly competitive. You have to drive out cost. M&S took £180 million out of its cost base last year from less waste, less energy, less water, less packaging. Plowed that back into positive growth in the business, the growth of a Simply Food store business. So again, very important that we're always taking down waste out of the business, good environmentally, good economically as well. Resilience. The supply chains that we service around the world have never been under greater pressure. Water shortage, drought, extreme weather events, social unrest. The battle for talent and skills to make sure people will produce food in the future, will still farm, will still produce clothing. And again, Marks & Spencer is at the forefront of thinking about those resilient supply chains to deal with the turbulent world. And then that fifth thing, this new marketplace I've alluded to, the Teslas, the Airbnbs, be very clear, our marketplace, food and clothing, is just as ripe for disruption as anybody else's. Unless we can find a way of being truly sustainable, low carbon, circular, restorative when we use nature, committed to fairness, equality, and well-being in terms of how we treat people, we will fail as well. It's very easy for the old guy to turn up and hold his hand up and say things don't work and we need to do better. And yet you, the future, need to be the ones that replace me with better models, better approaches. Now, I was struck by something I read in Harvard Business Review. It interviewed leaders around the world, and it said the #1 leadership characteristic of the 21st century is high moral and ethical standards. Now, I'm teaching granny to suck eggs in this audience. You know that as an absolutely obvious thing. You all have high morality and high ethics. But if you want to change the system, if you want to be in politics and change it, if you want to be in business and change it, those morals and those ethics will be tested. You're in the belly of the beast. But you must stay true to what you believe and keep those values. If you don't want them to be tested, retreat. Sit on the sidelines, let the system just meander on in its imperfect and way heading for a car crash. But if you want to get stuck in and change it, you have to keep that morality and those ethics, whatever the test of you. The second most important thing for all of us is EQ. And I say that advisedly in Cambridge, one of the finest universities in the world at driving IQ, turning out the brightest minds in the world. But the ability to bring that intelligence to bear for the benefit of people, those that surround you immediately, but communities and societies that go around us, is critical. EQ is a defining factor of the 21st century. Business skills, and this is where I'm going to come back to this word customer. Again, we can sit in here and come up with a perfect life cycle assessment to find we've got a new way of mobility, new approach to food, new approach to clothing that wins lots of awards and checks lots of theoretical boxes. If 32 million people who live and shop with Marks & Spencer don't buy into it because they can't see the benefits, it'll never take off. 10% of any society is self-declared green, and again, it's overrepresented in this room. But if we want to scale sustainability so everybody in society participates, we have to show people the benefits of it. You will live longer, we'll save you money, you'll have a more aspirational product, you'll be happier, you'll be healthier for it. That's what we need to show people. Never take your eye off the ball of getting the customer to buy into what you want to do. And my final point about you, the individual, is resilience. As much as I've painted the picture of a world that is, faces some very significant challenges, even crises in some ways, it is not always obvious to everybody else. There's a lot of inertia in the system. For you to change it takes effort, it takes resilience. I see a fellow up here with a bit of grey hair, in part, because I'm knocking on in age, part because it's tough. Even working for one of the most supportive businesses in the world in terms of sustainability, it's remorseless. You have to keep coming back for more, driving change. So that's the words I wanted to share with you. I don't have all the answers, but I can see a new world approaching rapidly. And often at times of great instability in a society and an economy, we're all looking down. We're all looking down at the problems we have today. Where's the dollar? Where's sales today? How are we going to deal with it? And yet in that very crisis is the opportunity that's emerging in the future. And you lie at the heart of that with your ideas about new business models to satisfy customer need in a way that's good for people, but also for planet and society. Thank you very much.